We live. Let's see. Okay, we're live now. Lesson 6 of the Zero to Hero Power App Saga. Today we are bringing back Geetha. I don't know if you had a chance to participate in lesson 5 or watch it, but it was it was loaded with content. I understand now, Geetha, the reason behind turning off camera because the bandwidth based on the content of the session may slow things down. Uh, but yeah, no, thank you so much, Gita, for presenting, sharing content with us. Last lesson was amazing. I had a lot of people giving me feedback. I'll pass that over to you later on. But it's I'm pretty excited about lesson 6 already. So floor is yours. You do your thing.
Thank you. I am super excited to be back here this week talking about how Power Apps can work better together with Power BI. So I'm going to go ahead and let me pull up my presentation here. And I do see a couple of familiar names that I saw last week. Thanks for coming back and welcome to all the new names that I'm seeing in here. And for those of you who are new and I didn't get to meet last Tuesday. I am Geetha Sivasailam. I'm a solutions architect and a Power Platform lead at Artist Consulting, a Microsoft partner based out of Dallas, Texas. I'm a power addict, passionate about all things Azure, AI, Office 365, and of course, everything Power Platform. I'm also the founder of the Dallas Fort Worth Power Platform user group. So we do meet virtually at this time of the year. So if any of you are still interested in wanting to network and know more, that's another free event. You guys can always join. We have another one coming up next Tuesday. So feel free to follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn so you can stay up to date on, what's happening. And I'll often try to share my trials and tribulations with the platform. So feel free to reach out if there's anything that I can help with. So today we are going to look at how Power BI and Power Apps can work better together. We'll have a quick overview of the Power Platform, an introduction to Power BI, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Power App visual and the Power BI visual. And then we're going to be pretty light on slides today. It's all going to be live built. So we're going to start building a report from scratch using SharePoint as a data source and try and embed a Power App to post updates. And then also look at a quick uh, example of how you can embed a Power BI visual as well into a Power App. So before we get started, maybe I could do a quick poll. Love to keep this class as interactive as possible. Raise your hand, drop a question in the chat, or stop me midway. I'm happy to answer. But how about maybe you can. I'm watching the window here. We could raise a couple of hands using the emojis on the Teams chat. How many of you here have used Power BI reports? Okay, so maybe not everybody's used Power BI reports. Okay, I do see a couple of them raise their hands. Um, any of you here build Power BI reports? Okay, I do see a few there. And then how many of you have built Power Apps? All right, yeah, we have quite a few hands up there. And how many of you here have tried embedding a Power App into a Power BI report? All right, looks like we do have a couple of folks who've already done that. So hopefully I have something new to show for those of you who've already worked on it. But today we are going to start from the basics and build a report and embed an app visual and see how we can post and update back to the data source. Now, this visual should be familiar if you are in the Power Platform ecosystem or if you've worked in the space or if you're in Microsoft Shop. This is a visual and these icons are going to be very familiar for you. This is our Power Platform ecosystem. There are 5 different tools that comprise the ecosystem. You have Power Apps, where you can use to turn your ideas into organizational solutions by enabling everyone to build custom apps compatible across platforms that solve business challenges. You have Power Automate that can be used to boost your business productivity to get more done by giving everyone the ability to automate your business processes. There's Power Virtual Agents. Think of them as conversational chatbots that you can use to engage conversationally with your customers and employees. You can build those with low code. The fourth tool there is Power Pages. You're able to quickly build low-code business websites for delivering vital information and services to your customers. The last one there is Power BI. So you could use that to make informed, confident business decisions by putting data-driven insights in your customers' and employees' hands. It's more than a sum of its parts. And at the bottom, you see some of the supporting foundational components. You have your connectors to connect to your data sources that are outside of your system, or even anything that's within your Microsoft ecosystem. You have AI Builder to have a low-code version of AI incorporated into your processes. There's Microsoft Dataverse, which is the underlying native data source for the platform. Power Effects would be your functions that you use within your apps to incorporate logic or make a call or query to your data source. All of that comes under Power Effects. And then, of course, you have managed environments to make it easy for you to govern your artifacts that you have in your tenant. It really is more than sum of its parts. Each component in the ecosystem is powerful alone, but it can be better together, and you're able to connect them not just to your Microsoft 365 services, but you're able to connect them to Azure, your Dynamics 365, and any of your legacy systems or backend sources or third-party systems, and able to build your end-to-end business solutions. It also allows you to do very highly scalable built-in security within your applications. You're able to run on a global enterprise-grade Microsoft cloud, so your business, IT, and dev teams can collaborate. So this is something that we're going to be focusing on, where we are going to talk about how Power BI and Power Apps can talk to each other, and what are the use cases for it, and how we can get that to be beneficial. All right, first up is Power BI. Just a quick overview for those of you who are brand new to Power BI. It is a collection of software services, apps, and connectors that work together to turn your unrelated sources of data into coherent, visually immersive, and interactive insights. So you've got a screenshot there that kind of shows you how you can visualize a sales and marketing report for your organization. Your data can be an Excel spreadsheet. It can be a collection of cloud-based or on-prem hybrid data warehouses. Power BI makes it easy for you to connect to those data sources, visualize it with charts, slicers, or even tabular matrix form of visuals. It helps you convert data from various data sources into interactive dashboards and analysis reports. So there's a lot you can do, starting with discovering what's important, driving quick decisions, and share that with anyone or everyone that you want within your organization. And the one caveat being, these insights are read-only. It's a one-way interaction. So that's what we're going to look at, of how you can get over that. What if you want actionable insights where the end user can provide input, make updates, and process them back in the underlying data source? This is where Power Apps Visual comes into play within the Power BI context. And that's what we're going to look at next. So you see the visual at the bottom left corner there, the right corner there. That should give you a quick animation of an app at the bottom. This is a Power App that's embedded on a Power BI report. You can see the user clicking on the top customers by opportunity. And as they're clicking, the Power App is changing the content that it's showing, because it knows what content the user is working with on that Power BI report. And then you also have a little submit button, so you are able to provide feedback back via that Power App and submit that, and you're able to push those updates back to your backend data source. And so that's what we're going to try and build one today from scratch, and we're going to see how we can get that to work at a beginner level, how you can build an app and embed it within a Power BI report. A couple of things for you to note. Normally, best practice is to always start building your report from Power BI desktop. You're able to embed a Power App visual within the report that you're building in Power BI Desktop. But there are a couple of things. It's a little quirky with the way that it works. You're not able to trigger a refresh or a report data set, or you're not able to see the live data that's provided from within your Power App Studio when you're editing the app. So I normally prefer and also recommend you to just have your report published through Power BI Desktop. But when you're getting ready to embed your app and wanting to do development work or build or make edits to your app, you want to do it on Power BI Service, where you go to Power BI Web and you edit your app there. So you're able to work with refreshes, and you're able to work with the data that you're actually wanting to see within your studio. Now let's talk a little bit about how this integration works. We kind of get the point that Power BI is read-only. We're able to embed a Power App, but how does Power App talk to Power BI? There is an object called Power BI integration object that is available in your app. As soon as you embed a Power App visual within your report, Power Apps automatically generates that object, and you'll see that when we're going through our demo. And now think of that as like a read-only cache of data. So Power BI is able to pass your read-only cache of data to your Power App, and you're able to use that and consume that data within your app and work with it and display that data. So that's a very important artifact that you will see get created when you first embed your visual and start adding your data fields that you would want to display. And you want to make sure that want to remember that that's kind of read only. You can update what's coming in that object, but you're able to use that data and push an update back to the actual data source. Because in Power App, you are still you still have the flexibility to connect to multiple data sources. You're not limited to just working with Power BI. A couple of things to note there. You're able to pass context-aware data from Power BI to Canvas app. But there is a limit of 1,000 maximum records. So that is the maximum number of records that Power BI visual can pass, or Power BI can pass to a Power Apps visual using that object. So I'm sure the next question is, what if I need to display more than 1,000 records? So if that is the case, you might want to take a step back and think, does this app really need to be an embedded app? If you're wanting to work with several rows of data, maybe it makes a good use case for a standalone Power App. Or if you are, and even for end users, perception of being able to work with several thousands of records at a time is not feasible and will not be intuitive. So you do want to batch them to a count that a user's eyes can perceive. So you might be able to incorporate that within your Power BI by enabling some filters at the top, making sure the user has their data set filtered down to a manageable amount of records, and that's what they work with in their Power App. So a couple of options there. Now, another thing that I did want to touch on is the data refresh. So when you are having an app embedded in Power App, you do have the ability to push any updates the user provides or anything that you've captured from the user back to the data source. But how can you make sure that your Power BI visual will reflect that change? So in Power BI, there are two ways that you can connect to your data. There's direct query, like for example, SQL supports direct query model, which is more like close to real-time lookup of data. You don't need to refresh it. It's pretty much real-time. You're just seeing, it's just querying your data source directly and it's showing you the data. So just refreshing your report page should show you the updated data. But then there's also the import model, but SharePoint is an example for an import model, wherein you are importing the data. So you're having a local cache of the data that you're displaying or using in your Power BI. To be able to refresh it, you're going to have to set refresh schedules on that data set. So you're going to have to set up a refresh schedule to say, okay, every day in the morning, 8 a.m., let's refresh this so everybody sees the most up-to-date data. So even if you refresh a Power BI report, you're not going to see the updated data unless your data set has refreshed. And that's the difference between direct query and import model. Now, another thing you want to remember is the data. There are limitations on your data set refresh based on the licensing you're on. So there's by default you get 8 refreshes per day, but then if you're on a premium capacity, you get like about 48 refreshes per day. So anytime you trigger a refresh, that counts towards your daily capacity limits. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're designing a solution. to embed an app and wanting to refresh the data whenever a user makes a change. I will take a pause there and see if there are any questions. All right. If you have any questions, feel free to, just raise your hand or unmute yourself. Okay, so I do not see any questions at this point, so we'll move on to our next slide. This is going to be our next slide here. So the last slide for the day, and then I'm going to jump into building a report and doing all the good stuff with the demo. Now, we talked about embedding a Power Apps visual into Power BI, but you are able to also do the other way around, where you embed a Power BI visual or a Power BI tile within your Power Apps. You're able to bring in the goodness of having visuals and those charts within your Power app itself. Now, when would you want to embed a Power BI tile into Power Apps? There are a couple of scenarios there. So if you are wanting to do a mashup of different reports from different workspaces, that's one use case that you could, try and do that, where you have a single screen that shows you tiles from different workspaces. You could also conditionally, display report and tiles, maybe based on a status or based on a current user role, or maybe based on the state of the business process. And then also, if you are not satisfied with the default charts that are available, you have a pie chart, you have a bar chart. There are a couple of charts that Power Apps already provides by default, but what if you want something more advanced, more sophisticated, then you could rely on a Power BI tab. Now, you do want to remember that those Power BI tiles need the user to have access on the Power BI side of things and not just the Power Apps. So the user will need to have access to the workspace to be able to look at the report, view the report and the tiles, and then also on the app side for them to be able to see both of those components work together. And also, this is a great way for you to take advantage of your existing data analysis and reporting by displaying your Power BI tiles inside of your apps. The best practice is to not have more than 3 Power BI tiles loaded at the same time within an app, just to keep it performant and optimized. And then, with the embedding of the tiles, you do have the option to have a dynamic filtering as well. So you are able to pass in a string value and, dynamically filter your tile to show certain data, maybe based on a variable that you're using in the app. That's possible. There are some limitations on the filtering working on mobile or other embedded scenarios. So this is just embedding the tile within a Power App is what we're on a standalone Power App is what we're talking about. And then you also want to minimize the number of visuals on the screens, which we talked about. Like 3 is a good number, but try not to go more than that to make sure your app load times are good. Just a few limitations that have been listed there. The tile control is not available for GCC high and DoD environments, and then the same refresh limits apply. For your data sets as well. So if you're having to refresh your Power BI data set to be able to look at stuff in the app, all of those count towards your daily capacity limits. So just something to keep in mind when you design solutions requiring these visuals embedded in the scenario. All right, so that is the end of our slides. Like I said, it's pretty light today because we're going to focus more on our demos. So I am going to pull up my Power BI desktop. And there's one more thing that I want to show before we get started. So I have a SharePoint list, and I have a list that is called the events list. So it's just a pretty simple list, just tracking all the different events that I'm hosting. And then with the start date, end date, and some notes. So let's say I have a company internal event hosting a site, and I have a location where I can actually host the events at, and I need my speakers to be able to provide me what any additional requests that they have to be able to present at those events. So just a quick list here. So what we're going to do is build a Power BI report based off of this. And then embed an app. So as a speaker, I can go in and add in my notes to say, put in my requests that I have for those events that I'm going to be speaking at. So we're just going to start with a very basic report. Let's go, and I am going to get my data. So go and get just gonna wait for this to pop up. All right. This is a SharePoint list. So we'll go ahead and click on SharePoint online list. And I am going to pick my URL. So let's go back. Let's get our URL. This is our URL. Go ahead and wait for that to load. It's going to try and connect me to it. Okay, so now it actually is showing me all the lists that I have access to. I'm going to go ahead and pick the one that I really want to be working with, and this is my data set. And let's wait for it to load. So this is our very first step. We're just connecting to the data, and we're trying to load all of the data. And Power BI Desktop will, does the magic of pulling that data in and dropping some of those queries in for us by default, just based on our selections. Now, let's go to our model view. So here is our model. We just have a single table here. I can go look at my edit query. I'm not going to make any change to the list here. I'm pretty much just getting everything in this list. So you'll notice that I have all of my events listed on that list. And we're just going to go ahead and close that. Just wanted to show you that we already have the data pulled in. And then now what I'm going to do is drop a visual. We're not going to do anything complex, just, very simple, just trying to list my ID. Let's go show my ID, my title, and then we're going to see what my requester notes are. And then we can also drop in our start and end dates as well. All right, so we have a bunch of these records already in place. Now, I am not going to get started on the Power App yet, but what I'm going to do is here's my report. It's got all of my data that I want to be seeing. But next step is for me to be able to provide a form on this report so a user can come in and type in the requester notes and push an update. So let's go ahead and save this. I am going to go ahead and make sure that I save it somewhere on my desktop. We are saving that, and then let me also publish it. So this is our step where you want to be able to publish it to your workspace so that you can work on the web and start embedding your Power App, and you can also share it when it's published to your workspace other than your workspace. You're able to share it with other users in your organization. Don't wait for that publish to be complete. It's just going to take a couple of minutes. All right, so we do have that published. Let me go back to our site here. I am going to go ahead and just refresh, just had that loaded. Let's go to my workspace. See if it actually, go ahead and open that up. I am not, yeah, there it is. This is our Zero to Hero demo. I'm going to go ahead and open my report, and I see my visual already in here. Now we're going to go ahead and get started with embedding a Power App. So on your right here, you have your visualizations pane, and you can see that there is a visual for Power Apps. So we're going to click on that. But remember, when you want to embed it, just make sure that you click outside of any visual or on a blank space so that the Power App visual will get embedded. Sometimes what happens is you are looking at something and you have another visual selected and you try to embed a visual, it'll try and override the one that you selected. So I'm going to select outside of it, and then I am going to move that to the side so we can have our app created. Now, the very first step here is for us to pick what fields we want to see in the app or fields that we're going to use in the app. Now, in my case, I'm going to keep it very simple. Just going to add a title and a requester notes field because that's the only fields just for demo. For the purpose of demo, we're going to just add those two fields so we can update them and see how that works. So I'm going to, and I need the ID field because that's how Power App can know which field or which item in the SharePoint list to go update. So we're going to select that. I'm going to do my title field, and then I'm going to do my requester field. And you notice that as soon as I started selecting it, it did change the visual here. So now it knows that it knows that there is Power BI contextual data coming into the app. And this next step is to create a new one. That's what we're going to do. You're also able to choose an existing app if you'd already embedded a Power App into another Power BI visual and you're wanting to embed, use that in this context. You're able to also use an existing app as well to interact with your Power BI visual. I'm going to go ahead and choose my developer tenant. And just a quick note there. So if any of you are wanting to play around with premium data sources and want to have a sandbox, signing up for the developer tenant is a great idea. You're able to, and recently they have also announced the ability to have multiple environments. So you're able to practice the ALM and change management and do all of that. And that's what I normally use even for demos or even with me playing around with any new features or announcements. We're going to go ahead and create a new app. And the moment I said create a new app, it's going to try and open up my Canvas studio, which is a Power Apps Designer Studio. And it is trying to set everything up for me so that I can get started with building it out. So the first thing you want to notice is that Power BI integration object that you see here on the left. This is the most important part of integrating with Power BI. This is the object that is going to be storing that read-only cache of data that Power BI is sending in to Power Apps. And by default, whenever you embed a Power App visual, it does give you, this kind of a layout and drops a gallery by default. Now, I do not need a gallery. I am going to delete that. Now, before I delete that, I want to also show you what it does. Let's go ahead to the gallery. So yeah, so you can see that it actually did drop that object and it has a property called data, which will give you all the results from the data set in that context of Power BI. So right now it has all of my data that's part of that data set or that table where we selected those fields from. And it's actually pulling in all of the values for those three fields. So I actually have access to all of this data right now. And now I can, be really creative with how I want to display the data, what I want to do with it, and how I want to push the data back. But we'll look at how we're going to work with a single item shortly. Let's go ahead and delete this gallery here. I do not want to use the gallery. And then before we embed any other controls, the first thing we're going to do is add a data source. Now, why do we need a data source? Because we're able to read content from Power BI. What if the user does have inputs to update and you need to push that back to SharePoint? So for that reason, we're going to add our SharePoint as a data source so that when we capture user input, we're able to send that back to our list. Let me go ahead and not here. I need to click on add data and then look for SharePoint. Yep, there we go. I already have one. I already have my site listed here, and this is the list that I'm going to use to patch my updates to. So now I have a reference to that data source. Let's go back to our screen here. I am just going to use a standard blue theme and let me go ahead and insert a text label. And then I'm not going to worry about the look and feel of this, but we're just going to call it title. And then let's go ahead and paste that. We're just going to have one for notes. That's what we're going to use. And then now let's go ahead and insert a input label. And then I'm going to drop in another one as well. All right, so let's go and just rename that. This is going to be our title, and this is going to be our notes. Now you can change this to be multi-line text as well. I'm just going to leave it single line for now. And then what we're going to do is add a button so I can actually submit my data when I see when there's an update. So let's go ahead and paste that, and I am going to call that submit. And now for us to have this form speaking with the data or the contextual data that Power BI is sending in, we need to have this form with these two field controls displaying data from Power BI. And how are we going to do that? We're going to make use of that integration object. So let's go ahead and call our integration object, which is the Power BI integration object, and then we're going to do .data. But then if you remember, this is actually a table. That's how Power BI is going to be sending in data. Any data that Power BI is going to be sending in as part of this object to Power App is going to be in a tabular format. But for us, we just need a single field, and we only need to show the title and notes for the event that the user is selecting on the report. So for that, I am going to say, get me my first item on that data set, and I want to display my title field. So you can see that if right now I don't have anything selected on that visual right here, I don't have anything selected, it is just picking the very first item to show me. So we're going to go ahead and copy that. And I am going to call this my requester notes. Doesn't like something. Let's see. Maybe I have a. Okay, maybe there was a typo in there. So for this specific one, I do not have any requester note, so it's not showing. And remember that it's just it has everything in it, but because I said first item, it's just picking the very first row in that table that's getting passed in this object. All right, so we have that. Our first step is to go ahead and save. Always remember to save your Power App for the first time. You always get tempted to go put in a bunch of changes, but then you do want to save it for that very first time so that your incremental save will start kicking off. So I am going to call this my 0 to hero app demo. We will save that. And then I am going to do one more thing. We are going to go ahead and wire up this piece here before we publish. So what I'm going to do is as soon as I have a change, I want to patch that update back to my data source, which is my events list in SharePoint. So we're going to, the patch is the way to do your upserts. You could it could be a brand new row that you're inserting, or it could also be an existing record that you're inserting. As part of the patch statement, you are supposed to pass in which record or an identification for that record that you want to be updating. So in this case, we're going to do an update, not an insert. So I am going to go ahead and say, I have the data field that I want to be updating would be the ID. So this is just telling Power Apps that, hey, go ahead and patch a record to SharePoint, but here's the item. You want to look up what the ID is for that record that Power BI sent in or the user is looking at. And that's the item ID that you should be updating. But now we only have a lookup to the record, but what are we updating? So that's what we're going to set up here. I'm going to call our, oh, I do have a typo here. Let me see. I'm supposed to be closing it with the right set of brackets. So we're going to say, whatever you see in this field, that's what you want to be sending back to the data source. And then I'm also going to be pulling in my requester notes. And I'm going to say, whatever you see in my notes field, let's go ahead and push that. And then I do have the wrong brackets here. We're going to close it with this. Let's see, it doesn't like something. Let's double check. Yes, so what it doesn't like here is that the data that's coming in specifically for the ID field or any of these fields that are coming in from Power BI is in the format of a text, which is a string. But SharePoint requires that field to be a number value. And it's smart enough to know because it knows that that's the end data source or your target where you're going to be patching. And so it is warning us saying that it doesn't match the data type, so you want to convert it. So we're going to use the function value, which will convert a string into a number. And then now we've gotten rid of that squiggly line. I'm going to go ahead and do a format text, and now you can see it's a little more clearer to read through what we've been typing out. So we're saying here's our data source, and this is the record that you want to be updating. Go look for my SharePoint list with that ID, and then here is my few values that I want to be updating. Okay, so we've got that. I am going to go ahead and publish that. Let's just go ahead and publish this, and then let's go back to our report here. Now, another thing you want to remember is to save your report because you just embedded it, you've added a couple of fields, you've configured an app on this report. We haven't saved it. So another thing to remember is to save it. So it saves all your changes. And I am going to go ahead and refresh this just a couple of times just to make sure. I've noticed that sometimes it doesn't quickly pick up the changes that you've just published because you're in edit mode and you already have the app open and you're trying to work with it within your Power BI report. So, okay, so now let's go ahead. And this warning is just telling me that it's in my developer environment. That's because that's a tenant that I'm using. But you will not see it if you're using in your organizational environments. So now I can switch, I can select a record. So you can see I'm actually selecting records, and it is smart enough to know which record I'm selecting because we have it configured to always pick that first record. So even though I select a record, Power BI is sending a table format with one row in it, which is the one that I've selected. And then we already have our fields wired up to display the exact column values. So you can see that as I'm navigating through the rows, it actually does, show me which fields to display based on my selection. So now let's try and make an update. So let's say, for example, this is my first event. I don't have a problem with my audio, but I think I'm going to have a lot of people attending. So I'm going to say, I need a really big room. And then let's go ahead and hit submit. And right now we've submitted it, and you probably did see those little crawling ants at the top. But within your app, you're able to drop in a notification to show you a confirmation that says that it's been successfully submitted. But we don't see the change here yet. That's because we talked about the different models that your data set uses. SharePoint does use an import model. So the only way to see an update would be to refresh your data set, or you would have to have your data sets scheduled to refresh. But we can go to our SharePoint list to see if our Power App did a successful update of our yep. So, okay, I see what I did. So here is our title, but I actually did I think I flipped out the fields. Sorry about that. That's what happens when you're doing something live. The demos don't always work as expected. This is supposed to be my note field. I am going to go ahead and I switched it out, and that's why it's having that the other way around. Okay, so this is our title field and this is our notes field. So let's go ahead and swap that out so we actually see the right fields getting populated. So this needs to be our title field, and then this needs to be our note field. And then what I'm going to do is also add a little notification so that we can see the next time we make an update, we can see that it does show. We're just going to call it success, but there are patterns for you to capture any errors or have error handling built in by seeing if the patch did work successfully. That's another way to also handle that. But for now, we're going to go ahead and do this. I am going to go ahead and choose my notification type to be success. And then I am also going to do one more thing, just so I know what version of my app we're looking at. I'm just going to add a little version here so I know that it actually did pick up my change, because I've seen that sometimes not pick it up right away, a couple of refreshes, and then you'll see the change. So we've made our changes. So we're going to go ahead and run through that scenario once again. Let's go back. I've published it. Now I'm going to go ahead and refresh my report until I see my little version number at the bottom, so I can be for sure that all my latest updates are in. We don't see it yet, so let's go a second time. Okay, there we go. So we see that. So now I see that this version does have all of my updates in. All right, so let's go ahead and maybe I will go pick another one. Let's go pick this one, and then I will say the same thing. I need a bigger room, and then go ahead and submit it. We should see a little pop-up there. So that tells us that it was successfully posted. And if I go to my SharePoint list and refresh that, you do see that the title hasn't been updated. It's just the same. The field that we updated was the requester notes, and you do see that from within the context of Power BI, you are able to use information and capture user input in a Power App and post that back to your SharePoint list. Now, one thing you want to notice is that this hasn't updated yet. So we're going to go back to our workspace, go to our data set, and refresh that. So I can show you, let's see, something is, maybe there's something going on with my data set. Let's go check my settings. Was an error. I'm going to go ahead and try one more time. Let's go back up here. I can also go back to my report. What I'm going to do is go back to my report here. Because I already have my Power App embedded, I need to download this file so that I have my latest changes. We are going to export it. And then let me open that up so we can look at the data set and refresh it from Power BI Desktop as well. Let's go back to my downloads, trying to pull it out. See if it will. It's trying to load the Power BI report. Okay, it's trying to pull that in. All right, here we go. Here is my report here. What I'm going to do is try and run a refresher. For some reason on the web, my refresh isn't working. I'm going to just try it from my Power BI desktop to make sure that it works. So let's wait for that to refresh. And then we will come back to our report here. And then you see that it did refresh. Now, there are a couple of ways that, it's not really ideal for us to have an app embedded, but then you having to actually manually go and refresh. That's not going to work in a business scenario. A business user who's going to be making updates is going to expect to see that refreshed, at least, close to real time, if not immediately. So within Power App, you do have the option to refresh the report visual itself. So, there's a call that you can make to do a data refresh that will refresh the report. But to be able to refresh a data set, you do have a Power FX function that you can use by passing in the data set ID. So you should be able to go to your report, grab that data set ID from the URL here, and then pass that in your, use that function to refresh. Or the other way is for you to also kick off a flow. In flow, Power BI connector has an action that allows you to refresh a data set. So you are able to also call a flow And then as soon as your submit is successful, you have control over it. So every time there's a successful submission, kick off a flow or try calling the command line that you already have or Power Effects that you already have within Power BI to or sorry, within the app to refresh your data set in Power BI. So this is only needed for import model data sources like SharePoint, but if it's a SQL instance or in any instance that you're using direct query model, you wouldn't have to do that. And I'm just going to show you what this is the call that you would make to refresh your visual dashboard, and I'll show you how that works. You're not going to see it immediately refresh the data itself, but this is something that you can use if you're using a direct query model, or if you want to call this after your flow executes to refresh the data set. And remember, this refresh doesn't refresh your data set, it just refreshes your visual. Let's go ahead and just save that, and I'll just show you how you can look at it. Go ahead and publish that, and then come back. To our report here. Let's go ahead and refresh it so that I actually see my version 2 because it hasn't picked up my changes yet. Okay, there we go. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll just take that out, and we'll just say this is my test note, and go ahead and submit that. Now, when I hit submit, just watch the corner, the top left corner on this visual, you see that it'll automatically refresh because we have that call within Power Apps. So I'm going to go hit refresh, and then you see that little thing. It just showed up for barely 1 second, but that's how you can refresh your visual directly from Power Apps. So it's as powerful that you can capture input and then also send a command back to Power BI saying, hey, go refresh my visual. Now, because we're using an import model, you're not seeing the change here yet. But if it was a direct query model, it would just immediately show you the change and you don't have to manually refresh the report. But for SharePoint, you'd have to do an extra step, which would be either to call a flow or call the Power BI dataset refresh action or the Power FX command within your app and then call the refresh. So that's a couple of ways for you to do it. Now we're already at 150. But that was a quick demo of how you can embed an app within Power BI. I did also want to show you how you can embed a Power BI tile. Just a quick walkthrough of that. I already have a bunch of reports in my workspace. And so I am going to go ahead and open up my chart section, and you'll notice that there is a Power BI tile. So let's go ahead and open that up. I can choose my workspace. I can choose my dashboard, and then I can also choose a tile that I want to embed. So as soon as I do that, it's trying to pull that in. Right now, what I have is I have my whole dashboard embedded as a tile, and so it is actually pulling up my entire dashboard. I'm going to show you also an example of just a simple tile. Let me go ahead and see if I can pull one. Hopefully, yeah. So this is another example of a dashboard. I know it's not very clear, but that's because of the resolution that I'm on my PC and also the real estate here. But you are able to embed a whole dashboard if you want to, or you're also are able to do that for a specific report. I did want to change that. Let me see if I can find one with just a tile. Yep, there's one with a tile. So here's just a single tile. And so for you to be able to embed it, what you will need to do is go to one of your, for example, let's go to our report here, and then wait for that to load. So for example, if you want to embed this tile, you're going to have to edit it, and then you are able to pin the visual to a dashboard and then use that, reference that visual in your, that you've just pinned to a dashboard as an example for you to be able to see it listed here. So that's just something for you to keep in mind, to be pinning any specific tiles that you would want to see in a dashboard, so that way it pulls in the whole thing. But here's just a quick demo of how you could actually embed a tile, go the other way around and embed a Power BI tile as well. Um, that is all that I had that I wanted to cover for the demo. Are there any questions or any other thoughts? I'm just looking at the chat. Listing command line. Yeah, so I hopefully I did cover that for you. I know someone had that question on the Power BI data refresh. Hopefully I did get that covered. Wait,
It was with, and if there are other questions, folks wanted to ask, they can unmute and just pose the question. Anybody?
either that I did a very good job of explaining it and no one has any questions, or they're waiting to try it all out and come back with questions.
Yeah, it looked pretty easy to me, but it could be just the content and the way that it was delivered. So very, very good session once again. Thanks, Geetha,
Thank you for
for
having me.
um, for donating your time and your knowledge to us. Next week, we are going to dive into a bit more of the Power Apps on the design front with Leo Russo. So you don't want to miss that. And then you have Geeta's contact information. Should you have additional questions, I believe she'd be okay to take those questions and provide answers. You can send it to me as well if you have questions. I can funnel. I can try to answer some of them. I don't know if I'll be able
Mhm.
to, but Geeta will for sure. Uh, and we'll
Definitely
go
happy to
from
help.
there
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
sure.
feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. And, if you have any questions, we can always catch up on social